All right, we are back and it is the end of week 10 and I have a results update that I'll be sharing with you, take you through a couple of other things. But before we get into that, I want to go into the update on the results. So this week, as I pull it up, body, and so week 9, body weight was 85.4 kilograms down to 84.7, so a 700 gram drop there. We saw body fat percentage go from 11.4% down to 10.5%. So we're now into the 10s. I'll talk a little bit more about how that's going to look moving forward into the future. Lean mass, it was 75.7 and now it's 75.8. So actually a 100 gram increase in lean mass. There's a couple of things that can infiltrate or affect that, so it's not necessarily absolutely we've put on 100 grams of muscle, but that is also a possibility, which is good because when you're in a deficit, as if you saw last video, I took the calories from 2550 per week down to 2300 per week, so with my coach, so that's a 250 gram further deficit. So there is going to be, because we have dropped that even lower, that does mean that you should technically have less fuel. So to be able to maintain, in this case, even add 100 grams of lean mass is quite a good result, purely looking at the results number side of things. And then the fat content of my body went from 9.7 kilograms to 8.9, so it's an 800 gram drop in body fat. Body fat in grams. So I also want to just touch on, because last week I went through the skin folds and we had a massive drop in one of those. So last week the skin folds were abdominal 10.8. Well, let's just round up. So abs 11, pec 7, and quads 11. This check-in was abs were 9, pecs 6 or 6.4. So nearly 6.5, and quads at 10. So quite some good drops there as well, particularly in the abdominals, which honestly it's always been the last thing to leave my body fat, and that is because in men they do hold most of their body fat around their stomachs and even a little bit in the lower back as well. And that's particularly true for me. And then females, they'll carry a lot of their weight sort of in their thighs, in their thigh region. And their legs is traditionally sort of where they hold most of their fat. And this is a maternal thing for females, or an evolution thing. So for females, it's more the hips and their thighs where they'll store a lot of their body fat. And then for guys, it is actually around their gut. And interestingly enough, in different cultures and contexts, a big belly can actually be seen. The guy with the biggest belly is actually seen as the leader or the most sexy. But in my culture and in my value system, you want to have those lean abs, which is exactly what the look that I'm going for. So objectively speaking, the numbers are looking really good and the weight is coming off. Decided that I was going to do a 3-week mini cut. So ultimately we are now, well, since I'm recording this Monday, we're now over halfway of what that looks like. Most likely we'll stop after that period because it will be 12 weeks of pure dieting. I want to try and get into the 9. So I said before, I'm down to 10.5. I do want to try and crack into the 9% range, which I do believe that I'll be able to do, because it has been that time period. We're only 11 days into that super sort of more harsh cut down to 2,300 calories. It's still a fair bit of food, so being able to really maximize that. I'm not feeling super duper hungry. Increased my training days to 4, so feeling good, the body's feeling good. So I also did 10 rounds on the heavy bag after a workout late last night, and this wasn't for any sort of fat loss reasons. That is or can be a benefit of doing that, but I'm not adding it to hasten up the results or quicken up the results or anything like that. It's purely just to keep the fighting skills sharp, make sure that you're still feeling good. And I actually videoed it, and this was really interesting because I videoed it, I put it up on Instagram. You can follow that, Hayden Wilson X. But when I was throwing them in, and if you see the video, the boxing bag, the boxing equipment at my gym is super dismal. So the boxing bag's actually so saggy, so you're trying to punch into technically where the head would be, and it's just really just average. I've asked a couple of times for them to be able to update it, but it's a work in progress and you just work with what you've got. But it's really, really interesting. The number one thing that I want to talk about as a part of that is, as I was watching back, you're throwing the punches, and I'm not sort of any sort of elite boxer by any standard or stretch of the imagination, but I was, just doing it, and I've done a little bit of training. So, but then looking back immediately, because of the feedback that the video gives you, I can see that, when I'm throwing a straight, but then as I'm throwing my right, I was, instead of just going bang, just throwing it straight, I was actually coming right across, like almost like an overhand punch, which I didn't realize at the time that I was doing. It was only with reflection and looking at the video and looking at the evidence. This is why it's so important to, one, take stock of the reality that exists all around you. So I love taking videos of my lifting. I love taking videos of any sort of form of exercise, not from an ego standpoint, but from a objective feedback loop that you can create by looking at what you're doing. Definitely a coach can provide this as well, but even with your coach, you can take a video of what you're doing, and then you can look at your results, or you can look at the actual reality of what that looks like, and then you can start to make some adjustments. So now going forward, I can look at that form and then be able to pick up on little cues and little things that I can be doing differently, whether it's in my lifting or whether it's in boxing or whatever element of my life. And I take this into other areas of my life as well. I'm massive. If you look in my study just around, just outside this door, I actually have maybe the last 10 to 15 years worth of journals. So I've taken them to the last 2 or 3, 4, 5 houses that I've moved into now until we moved into this one. And it's just an archive of thoughts, feelings, frustrations, wins, losses, business plans. Basically, it's an archive of my brain over time, almost like a time capsule over time that I've been able to keep. And I do this for a couple of reasons. First is because it's, I call it the $5 psychologist. So you buy these journals for these blank diaries for $5, but it's a really good tool to be able to ask yourself questions, see how you're going, see how you're progressing, get out those frustrations, understand yourself on a deeper level, perform that self-reflection so you can make different choices in the future. And it makes it really objective and real when you get it actually out onto the paper. So I've been a massive proponent of reflection tools, whether it is video, whether it is pen to paper, for many years now. It's something that has been probably the biggest value add into my life. So if you haven't got a $5 psychologist, pick yourself up one. Now, one of the most important principles I wanted to talk about in this video, now that we are 10 weeks deep into this dad bod or redefined dad bod self-imposed challenge, is that great programming can't fix poor form. And so you can have the best programming in the entire world, and it can be written. I've literally had programs written by, as I've mentioned before, by Charles Poliquin and some of the greatest programming and strength and conditioning experts in the entire world. But if you don't have your form dialed in, then it doesn't even matter. You're going to continually injure yourself. You're going to continually perform at lower and lower levels in comparison to what you could ultimately be able to do. So I've had 2 or 3 technique sessions now, and I know it sounds crazy because I've been lifting for so long, but that has been by hand, single-handedly, the number one thing that I have implemented into my lifting is hiring a coach to get hands-on and see me in person to be able to pick up on the little nuances. And I'll give you 2 examples. Is with my squat, what my coach has actually found is that because of how my body of mass sits, that it's actually better for me just before I squat down to actually stick my ass out a little bit. And then it sounds kind of like just pop the ass out a little bit. And what that does is it just helps me balance a bit more. It means that my knees can travel a little bit further over my toes. I can hit depth whilst keeping me safe because the back is in a less compromised position. It's nice and strong. My core's nice and strong. I'm bracing correctly. And so adding all those in together ends up for a really strong squat. And the second one was actually re-looking at my deadlift. So there's traditional wisdom where and the way that I learned 16 years ago through various videos on YouTube was that you want the bar to sit 1 inch away from your shins before you bend over. And so I'd learnt my entire life lifting life to really structure and make sure that was the way to lift, because I'd never really had feedback before. So you just know what you know, and this sort of lifting dogma entered my life, entered my realm, and became my gospel. And so I was trying to set up like this, but because of the length of my femurs, I'm 6 foot tall, and comparative to my torso, I actually have long legs or long femurs, it was actually destroying the angle and destroying the tightness that I could create because I was too close to the bar. And sometimes there are these idioms or these what you would think would be a principle, or what I thought was a principle inside of the lifting world, but really it's more of a guideline. And I think it's more about finding in life, and in particular in lifting, that we're talking about here, is finding the difference between principles that cannot be changed, universal principles of lifting, and then guidelines that need to be adapted for you and your body, because the way that you look and the way that I look and the dimensions and geometry of your body might be completely different to me. And when you are into strength training, there is no one size fits all. It is completely individualized to that person. So I actually just moved the bar out. So now I'm lifting. I tried it out for the first time last night. I'm lifting around 2 inches, well, probably about 3, but lifting 2 inches or so away from my shins, and actually it's allowing me, my hips are sitting a little bit higher, but it's allowing me to actually get into a peak position for that deadlift. Now, I would never have known that had I not had a coach being able to point out, this is exactly what would be better for your body. Try it on, see how it feels. And so by being able to do that, my knees are actually out of the way, and the bar is actually it's actually in a straight bar path now, which is what you want inside of it's what you want in any sort of lift. There may be a little bit of variance in certain liftings, but particularly with the deadlift, is any variance or any movement of the bar that's not straight up or down is actually energy leakage. And so you're using more energy than you really have to if there's anything more than a straight bar path inside of the deadlift. So looking at that and looking at the bar path, even just after last night, I am finding it is a lot more straight. My squat bar path is a lot more straight as well. So just cleaning up the technique is the number one thing that I've learned over the last 6 weeks, from really, really focusing on it, maybe even more, maybe in just like a month, being able to dial in that technique through the personalized aspect of how my body fits in terms of space and time, and all little things that you can get away with when it's a lighter weight, but as it starts to increase, that's why I was getting all these injuries. If you go back to week 2's update, the very first update I did on this Dad Shred, Dad Bod challenge, I was talking about injuries and different niggles that I was having, and I'm certainly not injury-free by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been able to lift fairly well now with the right form because there's a major focus on the little things that I didn't understand them until I was shown, until I was taught properly, which has now happened, and it's an ongoing thing as well. So it's not like, okay, now I know how to lift after a month's worth of strength training. It is a continual learning, unraveling on, and really unlearning of old behaviors. When I was squatting, I was finding that I would squat and then my second rep would be just like I used to squat. So it's really dialing that in terms of relearn or unlearning and then relearning a new technique, which is hard because you're creating new neural pathways inside of the mind. That's a little bit of an update in terms of diet, nutrition. I'm just sticking to the exact same plan. So 2,300 calories, I'm feeling lean, I'm feeling better. I did mention that I added a cardio session. I'll probably do that once a week. The only reason I'm doing that, you would have seen my video about how you don't need cardio from a scientific point of view, which is true. The only reason I'm adding that is I want to keep my skills sharp, and I want to get back into boxing. And I haven't told anyone this yet, but I actually want to do one of those corporate fights. So now that I've said this, it's in the universe. I'm actually gonna have to take action upon that. But I am seriously considering doing something like that. It's been something that, if you're gonna face your fears and these kind of idioms or these kind of things, I think that it's something that scares me. It scares me to put my skills to the test. I'm afraid of conflict. Certainly a lot better than what I used to be, but I think that would be the pinnacle of facing my fears, is actually stepping into the boxing ring and the physical conflict and knowing that I did it, that I put myself voluntarily on the line and that I went for it. So I'm definitely keen to look at how I can book something in, and it's just going to be sort of one of those amateur events where I have no idea who I'll be up against or anything like that. But a bit of fun and being able to really test myself and put myself into an uncomfortable position to really face those fears. So that's a little bit more about what that looks like, and then that'd be cool. I may be able to showcase a little bit of the journey on what that looks like from a preparation point of view for coming up to my first fight, if that's interesting. So that's a little bit of an update in terms of what things look like on the body transformation side of things. I'll be in this deficit for another at least 10 days, probably a maximum of 10 days, and nothing further from there. I can hear that my daughter has just come home, so I will be taking off now and spending a little bit of time with her. It's awesome, so good to be a dad. My son's now 3 weeks old. Been a lot of focus on what that looks like, and I'll be able to integrate a little bit more about what I'm learning from that side of things as well. And then I'm feeling great. I'm looking great. It's strange. I was saying to my coach, for the first time literally in my entire life, I'm feeling so much less self-conscious about how my body looks, and that I can lift up my shirt and almost try and stick my stomach out, and there's actually I can't stick it out because there's nothing like, I used to be skinny fat, but now there's nothing there, and it's just, I can't explain how much better it feels not to be self-conscious about my gut. And realistically, it's only taken 10 weeks. So if you're in the position where you are self-conscious, and yeah, I've spent years building muscle around that, so it hasn't just been 10 weeks in isolation, but it is phenomenal, and I'm definitely going to stay under 10%. Once I get under 10%, that's just going to be my new norm for the rest of my life. Because I just know how it feels, how I look. I hope to see you in the next video. I have an update coming up or have another check-in coming in 3 days time, and then there'll be another week. See how we go, see if we can get under that 9%, as I mentioned before. If you want to follow along further on the journey or see daily updates, head over to Hayden Wilson X on Instagram, and you can follow along there. All right, ciao.